Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Guy Kawasaki, Chief Evangelist of Canva and formerly an advisor of the Motorola business unit of Google and Chief Evangelist of Apple. He is the author of over 10 books on startups, entrepreneurship, and marketing. Guy, I'm happy to have you on the show here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, Guy, I'm really thrilled to have you here. And we start off every show with a favorite success quote or maybe even a saying of your own, since I know you've written so many books. So what do you got for us? And then go ahead and explain why you chose that.
My favorite quote is that some things need to be believed to be seen. And if you're an innovator, revolutionary, an entrepreneur, that's what it takes. It's not the attitude that if you see it, you'll believe it. It's if you believe it, you'll see it.
And is this something that you've seen, occur many times in your career, or you see a lot of young entrepreneurs and you really feel that that's impactful?
It's the only way an entrepreneur can think, actually.
Okay.
If you don't think like that, you're probably not an entrepreneur.
All right. So I think we'll really dive into the topic of entrepreneurship and what really makes an entrepreneur. So before we kind of get into that topic, let's dive into your story. I know you've shared it so many times, but you may be new to some of my audience and to the thousands of listeners. So I want them to know kind of who you are, how you got started with what you do. So go ahead and spend some time here and
Sure.
take the mic.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'll fast forward through, I went to Stanford, and after Stanford, I basically went to law school and quit after 2 weeks because I couldn't stand it. And then I went to an MBA program at UCLA. I started working in the jewelry company, believe it or not. So I went completely low tech, worked there for a few years, went to a small software company for a few months, and then went to Apple. So I was Apple's second software evangelist. My job was to convince people to write Mac software and create Mac hardware. So I worked at Apple in the Mac division, started some software companies, became a writer and a speaker, returned to Apple as Apple's chief evangelist, started another company, a venture capital firm, left Apple to start that company, and continued writing and speaking, advised Motorola, and now I'm the chief evangelist of a company called Canva, which is Sydney-based, and it is an online graphics design company. It's a service where you can use online, web features to create beautiful designs, fast, free, and easily.
So that was a great elevator pitch there. I got the whole scoop of your life. Let's start with Apple. When you first got there, I'm interested in what that culture was like, shifting from a jewelry company going to Apple, and what was that like at Apple in I believe it was the mid 80s when you got there.
Yes, it was the mid 80s. It was a fantastic place. I absolutely loved it. It was like being paid to go to Disneyland every day. Just fantastic. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world. I got to work for Steve Jobs. How many people can say that? And we were going to change the world. And we kind of did. Maybe not as soon as we thought, but we eventually did change the world.
Now, I know Apple at the time, especially when you were working there, and then many times after that, the company was, quote unquote, supposed to fail.
Yes,
I was working for Apple in the retail stores when they were wildly, thriving, the most unbeatable company, doing the iPhone launches, iPad launches here in San Diego. But when you were at Apple, it was. What was that like when you guys thought things weren't going to work, and how are you guys handling that? Because you could not have seen where Apple is today.
Well, obviously I didn't see that because I would have stayed, right? Or you could make the case that because I left Apple Apple improved and became what it was. But anyway,
that's another episode. We'll get you back on for that one.
that's another interpretation of what happened.
That's a good one.
So, I mean, in a sense, this supports my favorite saying that if you waited till Apple was a success to believe it was a success, it would have never been a success. You had to believe in Apple in order for it to become a success. And maybe that's the first time I learned this lesson. So that's just the way it is. And now I figured out that things are very seldom as good or as bad as people make them out to be. So when I was in Apple and it was supposed to die, it wasn't that bad. And when it's great at Apple, it's not that good. So it's always sort of in the middle.
All right. And so you worked with Apple in the mid 80s, and then you came back in the late 90s. So you've had two opportunities to work with obviously Steve Jobs here.
Yeah.
And what was one of the biggest, let's say, break this down simply just for the sake of time, but biggest life lesson you learned from Steve Jobs, and then how about a biggest business lesson you learned from Steve Jobs?
Well, the life lesson, I mean, you'd have to say that based on his dying, life is short, so you have to maximize it. That's the life lesson. The business lesson is that customers can very seldom tell you what they really need. They can tell you how to fix the current product, the current service, but they can't tell you how to, revolutionize. They can't tell you to create a Macintosh when all they're buying from you is an Apple II. So, that takes vision, it takes passion, and it takes some luck. So it's very difficult to look to your customer to tell you what you should create for the next curve.
So an example, like looking maybe at phones in the early 2000s, everyone was saying, "Oh, just make it faster and get a better battery in there, and I'm good. Make it cheaper in price." No one really saw the iPhone coming. Like,
not at all. No, well, they did see the iPhone coming, because at that point there was the iPod. Right. So if you saw an iPod, you said, okay, if this could be a phone, it'd be that much better. So that was kind of obvious, but no one saw the iPod, right? Everybody thought, oh, MP3 player, what could Apple possibly add? So I'll give you lots of examples like this. So what could Apple add to an MP3 player? How could Apple possibly support an Apple-only store? Right? Retail space is so expensive. How can they sell enough computers? People don't walk in and buy computers because they happen to be at Abercrombie and Fitch buying a hoodie, and then what? There's an Apple store next door. You go in, I'll just pop over and spend $3,000 buying a laptop. Apple store will never work.
Definitely did.
No kidding. And so, I mean, time and time again, if Apple had listened to these so-called experts, it truly would be dead. So I'm not saying, the best algorithm is to always ignore experts, but I'm telling you, the best algorithm is not listen to experts, because they can only tell you how to evolve something. They can't tell you how to create a revolution.
Wow. Yeah, I remember when I was at Apple in the retail store, selling computers, they were, we were told that the Apple store sells more per square foot, more dollar per square foot than any retail store in the country.
World.
Yeah, probably the world. Yeah. That was just
so. What a surprise, huh?
What a surprise.
So, who would have predicted that? I mean, if you go back in the archives and look when Apple announced the Apple Store, retail expert after retail expert said it'll never work. Never work.
I think that's just a huge mind shift when you're looking at building a company, just a way to create a revolution. And so what I want to touch on the subject of like creating a revolution, or having a big quarter, or like chasing the dollar amount, which is, I think there's a different type of person who's trying to create meaning in their work and really passionate about changing society versus someone who's trying to reach a goal that they wrote down, like $1 million a year or something.
Well, to tell you the truth, I mean, it's not as cut and dried as people like to make it. You always hear the story about how they really believed, and even though they were down to their last $100, they believed, and they bet the company, and a miracle occurred, and all that. So you hear those stories, and the reason why you hear those stories is it very seldom occurs. And so 99% of the time, the company does die. So it's hard to truly learn how to do business based on specific stories. Because for every story that you hear about Fred Smith coming down to the last payroll, going to Las Vegas, winning 10 grand, paying for that next payroll, and then FedEx turned around and was successful, there are 100 stories where the entrepreneur pursued it too long, should have given up long before, it was a doomed idea. So this is the hard part about, well, it's a hard part about reading business books, and it's a hard thing for people to really write good business books, because you can kind of prove anything you want. But, the victor gets to reinvent history, let's just say. How's that?
Yeah. So when should someone kind of throw in the towel? There's nothing wrong with throwing in the towel, but when should someone throw in the towel and maybe pivot to some a new idea or new business?
The honest answer to that is I don't know.
Yeah, it depends.
Right?
Show me the numbers. Yeah. Show me the numbers.
The best algorithm I can come up with is ask your wife.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Is there a book coming out on that soon? Or?
No, because that's the whole book. I mean, it's that simple.
It's one quote,
yeah,
but 100 pages.
Yeah, I can just say it 100 times.
Yeah, but people might buy it. It could you have some opportunity there. Now, you've been around a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs and a lot of very influential people.
Well, that's not actually true. I don't hang around Fortune 500 CEOs. When the hell would I do that?
I don't know. I assume you advise and you've been in the presence of many influential people in your life.
That's true.
You're like, I've been to TED. So I'm looking at the idea of like what makes a great CEO in what makes a great CEO.
Boy, don't you have any easy questions? So
no, it only gets harder from here. I started off with humor. Now we're getting to the meat, the filet mignon.
Yeah. So there is no single answer because there are different styles for different companies. So Steve Jobs was visionary, dictator, not exactly warm and fuzzy, right? So that's one kind of CEO. There are other kinds of CEOs who are warm and fuzzy. It's like, I hope, Sam Walton or, I don't know, Herb Keller. There are different kinds of CEOs. There's Larry Ellison, right? There's Richard Branson, the total likable kind of guy. And so I don't think there's a winning style or a simple style. There are multiple ways to success. That's the best I can do. I don't know what else to tell you.
You're like, you should have gave me that question ahead of time.
Well, no, because I would have told you not to ask it. It's not that I would have had a better answer. So a lot of it is, there are no simple answers. It's
any common traits that you've identified, maybe one, two or three that
usually successful CEOs are successful.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
How's that? Yeah, how's that for helpful?
It's hard to identify because there's always a way to prove that something wrong or.
Oh yeah. Whatever you say, I can prove you wrong.
Oh,
so I guarantee you that.
Okay. Let's look back. Turn it back to you now. Like I'd like to hear some failures that you've experienced on your path and how you handled them. Maybe at Apple, since we've been discussing that.
Well, I mean, you could make the case that I failed at Apple because Macintosh was never more than 10 or 15% market share. So was I a failure? Possibly. I mean, you could look at it that way, right? So there you go. There's a failure for you. I have never started a $1 billion company, right? I'm not a billionaire. So arguably, I'm not that successful. There's lots of ways to look at this.
Is that a goal, though? Is that a goal that you've actually tried to set out for?
What, make $1 billion?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have mind.
What would you do if you had $1 billion?
I wouldn't be on this podcast right now.
Are you serious? You wouldn't want to give back? You wouldn't want to give back to the community? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, that's what happens when you make $1 billion.
I'm gonna get a billionaire on my podcast and be like, "Guy, I got a billionaire, and he's here."
Okay, you tell me when you do that. All right.
All right. I will work the rest of my life trying to get a billionaire on the.
I hope you do. That's a
final.
Well, even better would be for you to be the billionaire.
Oh, yeah, I actually didn't think about that. You know what? I'm going to turn Knowledge for Men into $1 billion company,
Okay.
and then I'll give back.
Knock on wood. You can tell people that I inspired you to do that.
You gave me the advice that I needed.
Right. That's right.
I know you've had a few talks about just you speak at colleges and universities, especially the ones that you've attended. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs looking to start their first business?
The first piece of advice is to stop using Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. That's not the key. The key is to prototype. Prototype. That's the key. Get it out.
So stop with the numbers, stop with the presentations, and get your product.
Yes.
Get your
The
minimum viable product.
Right. The goal is not to get funding. The goal is to ship. Don't ever forget that.
Can you elaborate on that? I think that's a huge epiphany for a lot of people.
The goal is to ship. And your mission is not to raise money. Your mission is to ship. And that's very important that people understand that.
How do they get the money for the prototype?
Well, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, friends, fools, and family. You also need less money now because marketing is free or cheap with social media. You're using Amazon S3 or Rackspace to host. Your team is virtual, so you don't need real estate. Every tool, MySQL, PHP, Python, all that's free. So you literally need less money.
Yeah. So the barriers to entry are broken down, basically.
Yes, the barriers to entry are broken down. Good news. The barriers to entry are broken down. Also, bad news, because it means that more people can enter. So this means there will be more crappy companies, but at least it's now more of a meritocracy, and that is the key.
Yeah. I want to look at like your positions that you've had as a chief evangelist. Can you talk about what that is and the importance of that in new companies?
A chief evangelist is the person who sort of leads the charge for a company, outward facing, although there is a job to be done for inward evangelism in larger companies. And evangelism comes from Greek words of bringing the good news. So you're bringing the good news about what your product or service means.
And a part of that, leading the charge is creating a story. And, what impact does that have on a company? Like creating a real inspiring story for people to follow?
It's a way to communicate the good news that, everybody says they have patent pending, curve jumping, paradigm shifting, outstanding product or service. But if you tell a story about why you created the product or service, what it means to you, I think it's a much more powerful method.
All right. And we just kind of gone through, briefly we brushed on your story, your career, and then we've kind of gone through some of the topics here. I just want to touch on now the knowledge round. And so I just asked the guests some rapid fire questions here. Basically what I've been doing. So are you ready for the knowledge round, Guy?
Okay.
Welcome to the knowledge round, where the guests will be asked rapid fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime.
All right. First question I have for you guys. How would you explain entrepreneurship to a newcomer, someone who's just starting out?
Entrepreneurship is the process of anticipating what people need before they realize it.
All right. And Guy, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of their purpose or what they should do?
In life?
In life.
Man up.
What does that mean?
Man up?
Yeah.
Man up means shut up and get to work.
All right. And is there anything that was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
Nothing that I would say was beyond my control or overcoming. In other words, I do not consider myself a victim at all.
So things have happened, but you've accepted responsibility for those things.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to have played professional hockey, but I never did, right? So, I don't have the ability to do that, let's say, as an example. So what? I mean, what am I supposed to do? Cry a river? I mean, at the end of the day, you either deliver or you don't. And there's really no excuse. You either deliver or you don't. It is that simple.
So you either get the results or you're not getting results.
Yeah. End of discussion. Now, this is for me, okay? There are people who have to overcome major, major issues. I'm fortunate. I don't have that kind of issue. But I think it's better to go through life not playing the victim. Even if you are a victim, and there are people who are victims, but if you believe you're a victim, you will be a victim.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Can you name a person who's had a tremendous impact on your life or career? Maybe someone who's been a mentor figure to you?
Well, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was not a mentor because he just, that's not his personality. But he definitely was a major influence. I would not be where I am without Steve Jobs.
And why do you say that?
Because he showed me how innovation works. He showed me about passion and evangelism. He showed me what you can do if you really believe.
Now, off topic, off the knowledge round, is he a guy that really just works? He just works day in, day out, 16 hours a day, just fully committed to the business.
Yes, he was committed, and he demanded commitment.
And now I know this is a challenging question for anyone like yourself and an author, but what would you say are your 3 most influential books and why?
So book number 1 is If You Want to Write by Brenda Ueland. It explains the creativity process, not limited to writing, to anything, programming, entrepreneuring, whatever. So that's book number 1. Book number 2 is Influence by Bob Cialdini. Outstanding book about social psychology, how to win friends and influence people, although that's the Dale Carnegie book's name. But this is social psychology brought up to modern times. That's the second book. And the third book would probably be a book called Absolute Value by a guy named Emmanuel Rosen. This is a book that says, the way the internet works, where information is so fast, it's so free, and so widespread, that it's not necessarily a top-down influencer world anymore, that, Lonely Boy 15 could leave the best review on Amazon that makes your book successful. And this has enormous ramifications, that you don't just suck up to famous, important, powerful people, that the nobodies are the new somebodies.
I like that. I think that's a very powerful message to check that out. And Guy, what 2 or 3 skills do you need in order to succeed as an entrepreneur?
You need to be able to see the world as an optimist. It is opportunity, and you need the ability to work hard in the face of insurmountable odds.
That's entrepreneurship.
That's entrepreneurship. Yep.
It's like a David and Goliath type of story.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that analogy because there's a lot of ways. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a whole book about this analogy that actually David had some technological advantage, the slingshot. So, maybe it wasn't as cut and dried as people think. But, well, one interpretation is that entrepreneurs with technology can take on the Goliaths. But it is a complex metaphor, that metaphor. But, the secret to my success is hard work. It's that simple.
All right. And now, scenario here for you, Guy. It's usually a fun question here, but imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
I'd tell him to stay at Apple. Stay at Apple for the next 20 years. And your stock options will be worth so much money you won't even imagine what they could be. How's that?
Okay. Well, let me ask, what drove you? Because you came back in the late 90s, and then after that, you were there for a few years. But why did you leave at that point? It looks like the iPod just came out 2001. So,
well, I left the first time to start a Macintosh software company, and I left the second time because I wanted to start a venture capital firm.
Okay.
So both times I left to do different things.
Right. We can kind of look at the time frame here. This is this is early 2000s, kind of like the .com era. So did that play a part into your role of leaving and trying to create your own?
Well, I left at the starting point.
Okay.
Of the .com era.
All right. And Guy, what is one underrated characteristic that you believe every person should work on, and if they did, they could see massive results in their business and in their life?
I'm kind of conflicted here because I'm the chief evangelist of a company that helps you do this, but I think that the ability to create graphics is extremely important now. It's not just a text world. If you truly want to break through the noise, you need to be able to create graphics.
All right. So having good design as well is that a part of your? Okay.
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with having worked at Apple? is that where your passion there kind of grew out of?
Well, yeah,
Apple?
definitely. Steve Jobs heavily influenced my taste. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Now, it's just kind of like maybe summarizing some of your main points here, but looking back at, where you were, let's say, in law school for the first week, and then to where you are now and all the things that you've accomplished since then, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
Work your ass off.
I was hoping more, and then sometimes simple is just the wisdom of life.
Yep.
What does that mean? Like, what does that look like for you? Work your ass off, and
what part of work your ass off don't you understand?
I mean, are you saying the type of work your ass off, which is like work for 10 years straight without taking a vacation, or is it just like what is your?
No, it means that life. It's more of an attitude. It's not 61 hours versus 60. It's more of an attitude that life doesn't owe you anything.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you want it, you got to earn it. And funny how the hardest workers get the luckiest results. That's just the way it is. And so the secret to my success is I'm willing to work.
So if you want the quote unquote good life, you got to deserve the good life.
Well, don't get me wrong. Some people are just darn lucky, right? See, I'm gonna sneeze. I have a cold.
Everyone's getting cold. Everyone's getting cold right now.
You can edit that out.
Yeah, I might just leave it in. It could be funny. All right. Just wrapping up here now. That concludes the knowledge round. So I just want to touch on, what's exciting you today. What's waking you up in the morning today, Guy.
Basically, I love social media. I think that the entrepreneurship is much more of a meritocracy now. You don't have to raise as much money. You don't have to suck up. I love when anybody can start a company. That doesn't mean everybody will be successful, but at least it's not, just the typical kind of person who gets funded anymore. Anybody can try.
All right. I like that. I think that's a good note to end right there. And guys, you guys can check out Guy Kawasaki on his website, guykawasaki.com. And please go to Amazon and check out Guy Kawasaki. He has a plethora of great books on business, marketing, entrepreneurship for you guys to check out. All right, Guy, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and lessons here with my community today.
All right, take care. Good luck to all of you.
All right, take care. Bye, Guy.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.